So this site was really designed to be the next generation of R&D space for Nokia globally. And we'll share a little bit more about what that means here in a second. So Gensler had designed Nokia's last offices in Mountain View, and this was unfortunately the only photograph that we could really find that actually showed the workstations. So if and it'd probably be because it wasn't very exciting to look at a bunch of 8x8 cubes in Dilbert View. So in the far right up at the top there, you see, the former iteration of the offices. And I think that this is pretty true to most of the spaces that you would see in Silicon Valley. Typical 68-inch high, 8x8 Dilbert cubes that Conan O'Brien so brilliantly kind of slayed one evening on his program. So, now we have our Becky hat on here, so bear with us. So this is Becky talking. So really, one of the things she wanted to accomplish was to have an innovative location. Nokia does spends a lot of time doing research and development around the workplace, and had an extensive mobility program. In fact, all of their offices, or almost all their offices, in the rest of the globe are almost 100% mobile office type environments. And we'll talk a little bit more about the big aha that kind of changed that program here in the Valley. Obviously the mobile device category, as we just heard with a little bit of ribbing between Apple and Adobe, is pretty fierce at the moment. So Nokia is still the largest mobile provider in the world, but clearly the other devices are nipping at its heels, and so it needs to maintain a competitive advantage, and that's both in terms of the employees that they gather and the work that they're doing. And it needed to also become R&D guidelines that are going to, the prototype that was established here is in essence going to be rolled out globally for Nokia. It needed to provide the best work environment for its people. Nokia is very, very people-centric in terms of its culture. It's probably one of the best places to work. They put a lot of time and pay a lot of attention to taking care of their employees, and related to that is really a work-life balance. And so, Nokia is probably a second or third generation type workspace compared to some of the competitors where they get a lot of folks fresh out of school. This is engineers, that may be starting a family or have a family and, don't want to be working 24 hours a day. They really want to have work-life balance. So the site was a really critical part of this. In essence, we were consolidating 5 sites down into one, and you can imagine sort of the mutiny and the shrieks of horror when the folks from San Francisco heard that they might have to move beyond the valley. So the goal was how do we make this as painless for everybody as we possibly can? So this site that you visited here today, which I think is incredibly innovative, when Becky and crew took on this project was actually in receivership. So it was a big risk, but a lot of the other sites that they were looking at were buildings that were more kind of typical to track, urban or suburban office parks, that had zero amenities around them, sort of limited access to public transportation. This site benefits from the fact that it is literally, a block from Caltrain, which is the main north-south corridor. For those of you that don't know, the Bay Area, the north-south corridor between San Francisco and San Jose. And then also a really amenity-rich area with Macy's and Target and something like 100 and some restaurants within basically a 5-minute walk. And no corporate campus can really match that. So, the site was a critical part of this. So the big aha came when, as I mentioned earlier, globally, Nokia's workplace is 100% open office, including the CEO, he sits in an open office, and it's also 100% mobile. And as we started to do the programming here, we were trying to kind of shoehorn in this sort of mobile office sort of approach, and, there was this sort of aha moment that when we realized that the engineers really don't work like administrative staff, and we needed to be more responsive to them and their needs.
So Nokia came to Gensler to really understand how this R&D process and this way of working can help envision and position and design the next generation R&D facility. R&D differs in the sense that there are higher levels of focused work, there's extreme versions of collaboration, and they have this thing called on-site mobility, which means that they're on the campus, but they're not necessarily at their desk. So what we did was we spent 5 months, we actually went to talk to people. We talked to 23 R&D individuals, And after we came back to our office and tried to understand what that really meant, we went back out and we did 5 innovation workshops with the users at Nokia. So that spanned everywhere from the US through the UK to Bangalore, Finland, and Germany. So we did confirm that they work differently, but the main driver for this was the fact that Nokia at the time, which was 2 years ago, was adopting this process called agile development. And agile development had its impetus in the software world, but and it was readily embraced by the groups at Nokia within the software groups. However, they were also starting to test it in the hardware groups. I want to walk through 3 insights that we found in how this changing R&D process has influenced the way that we as designers see space and how people inhabit the space. So the first insight is about crowd work collaboration, which is the duration and intensity of individual and group ideation. So you can see here the first diagram that shows the waterfall model. That was the original R&D process. The waterfall model took 2 to 3 years from start to beginning. And this is how the process worked, and I'm generalizing here. But the process at the beginning, at the start with those little blue dots, there was a small group of people that were creating the idea. And as the idea grew, so did the team started to grow and become a larger group of people who were not only collaborating, but focusing and producing the idea. And then as the product came to its fruition, at the end, it became a smaller group, just like it was at the beginning. Now, the agile model is really, really different, actually. Instead of being 2 to 3 years, it's actually 2 to 4 weeks. And the intention for this is that they want to have a market-ready product or service at the end of the day. So you can see the group is a smaller group, but it starts off meeting in this meeting called Scrum meeting at the beginning of the day. And they start off and try to understand what their tasks are for the day, and then they split off into individual or small group collaboration. And then they come back into a group, and then they split off again, and they come back. They do this once a day. They do this kind of come together, go apart, come together, go apart. And it was really, really fascinating to us. And the design implication for this first insight was, well, 1, the groups are much smaller and more agile. 2, they are cross-disciplinary from the very beginning, as opposed to this waterfall model where some of the other members of the team would come in mid-idea or mid-ideation. And then 3, these boom and bust cycles of focus and collaboration were really fascinating to us, and spurred the idea of a new workplace model. The second insight is about work style cycle rates. Now, again, the waterfall model, we said 2 to 3 years, and there's a circle going on here that doesn't show, but typically every product development cycle goes through 4 distinct phases. So strategize, create, produce, and evaluate. Now, the agile model, again, differed in the sense that it wasn't necessarily who you were, whether you're a software designer or hardware designer, but it was really how you worked. So for example, the applications groups, so the guys that are actually making apps on their phone, they were cycling once a week. Crazy, right? So they were going from strategize through create to produce and evaluating, which meant testing their products and services within the scope of 1 week. On the other end of the spectrum, the core infrastructure groups, were the guys that are doing the back-end software development, were cycling 1 cycle every 3 months. So they were really more on a long-term basis. And in the middle, the frameworks groups, so the people that are working on the devices itself and the product design for that, 1 cycle every 3 months. So you can see that different groups were cycling at different rates, and they were cross-disciplinary in these boom and bust cycles of focus and collaboration, which, again, in terms of a design implication, told us that these teams really needed to own their spaces. They needed to be able to customize their spaces on a day-to-day basis in order to respond to not only the work cycle rates, but the way that they were working. And also in terms of if there were any new business ideas that came up in new business units that hopped up in the interim with these new ideas. Lastly, the third insight is about a platform for idea generation. Nokia, like many other companies, were opening up its doors to academia, business partnerships, and even customers in order to co-develop ideas. And in the center here is the idea, innovation, and creativity. So the design implication for us was to understand how we could design a workplace that could balance both the security needs of an R&D organization with the notion of a visitor experience, because all these different people were coming in to help co-create design. So we had 5 different solutions what we call space principles or space guidelines for the solution set. The first one is really designing for the team, not the individual. The team was becoming the critical unit for R&D development. And so what we had to understand was that it should be more about all about the we spaces, not about me spaces, not about the individual. Even rooms for focus, which are traditionally individual spaces, are designed for small groups and small teams. The next one is about expressing open innovation through the space. What we really wanted to do was let the space tell the story so that the ideas are visible even if the team members aren't there. Another aspect of expressing open innovation was allowing the space to be able to be a platform for testing their technology. So the intention here is to connect people to share work in progress ideas. So you'll see throughout the space, if there's a digital tool, there's going to be an analog tool next to it, whether it's a whiteboard or Post-its or pens and paper. It's supposed to be a little bit of both in order to be able to rapidly develop those ideas. The third one is about a living workplace experience. Silicon Valley is famous for creating a workplace model where people live at work, especially for the tech industry. And this was very different, a different idea or concept for the Nokia employees, as Colin mentioned. They were the second or third job for them. Culturally, in terms of the European culture, they were much more predisposed to separate their work life from their family life. So, but we saw an opportunity here to be able to bring that Silicon Valley informality matched with this European sense of separating work and life, and not necessarily live at work, but be able to create a workplace experience where you're super productive, and to take cues from the hospitality industry like hotels, who can easily blend living and working much more seamlessly. The fifth space principle is about adaptability from micro to macro. Now, we talked about the fluidity of the teams. And so because the teams were changing so rapidly, the intention here was less of fluidity from a real estate perspective but from a user perspective. So we wanted the teams to be able to change their desks around on a given day. So it could be small-scale changes like their desk, or even large-scale changes like their team areas, through to large-scale plate changes like a team was moving from one place to another. And lastly, infusing local authenticity with a global perspective. Nokia has always supported the idea that local flavors should come through within any given location. And the intention here is to bring, let the content drive the expression of the space. So for example, in the Hollywood research location, they work primarily with media companies, so the intention is to make it feel like a sort of a media environment. So for Silicon Valley here, the intention was to really express this sort of informality and the energy and spirit of Silicon Valley. And blended with that is the notion of Nokia's brand of connecting people and really letting the technology melt away and be able to really use the space to connect people and showcase the people and the ideas within.
So how did we do it? So, so now just to kind of share how the ideas sort of physically manifested. You know, this is it's kind of funny. We were searching yesterday for images of Silicon Valley engineers, and there were some that were kind of cliche and may have offended people, so we decided not to put those in. But you know, so we found these, probably not the best, but you know, there's in the Valley, the engineer is king and queen. They rule this area. They're the backbone. They're the engine. They are the thing that make all the amazing innovations that we all experience every day happen and make them reality. So, you know, I think, and many people in this room have spent a lot of time trying to figure out, you know, what is the best work environment for these people. And, you know, Sun Microsystems, you know, did, you know, let's not even argue with them anymore about giving them, you know, privacy. Let's put them in a 100% closed office environment. Just give them an office, you know. But I think, you know, we can see that maybe that didn't work out quite so well because there is something about, you know, as Lisa was mentioning, as processes change, as we move to more agile, open processes, we need to balance the needs of the company which are more about having this openness and faster times to market, et cetera, with the needs of the engineers. So I think that was sort of our ultimate challenge here in this facility. So this facility is 100% open office, and that's actually a photograph of it. So there's sort of a sense of semi-privacy in the physical work area, but that is balanced with a huge array of other types of support spaces. So we have 53% of the space in this building that's dedicated towards the individual, and 47% which is dedicated towards the group or we. And the we would be things like the commons that we're meeting in here. It would be things like privacy rooms, hubs, et cetera, which I'll get into here in a minute. But what's really critical is that this is a number that I think is pretty significant, because in their old offices, it probably was about 80% dedicated to the individual and 20% dedicated to the we space. So for the manufacturers in the room, I think take note, because we can sort of see where the money is moving. It's definitely moving away from workstations. So we have 614 workspaces. I can't read that number.
112.
Thank you. 112 touchdown spaces. There's about 90% assigned seating in the facility, about 10% mobility. We have 79 enclosed spaces, and we have a number of different open areas as well.
99.
99, thank you. So, and can I do a little call out here to Steve Jobs? One of the brilliant things that he did at Pixar is this sort of social engineering, where I don't remember what they call it, like their town hall or whatever, the cafeteria's there, the movie screening theater's there, the mailroom's there, and all the bathrooms, only one set of bathrooms, are there off of that sort of main large atrium type space. And the idea being that knowing engineers and digital designers and the like are probably somewhat introverted, not always, but they have a tendency to be on the introverted side, to pull them out of their kind of work area kind of into this main area. So I wish I could say that this was totally our idea, but it's definitely inspired by some of the things that we've seen from some of the facilities around here. This commons area is really designed to pull the engineers into this area on a daily basis. The coffee bars here, there are great meeting rooms down here. The other thing, as Lisa was mentioning, Nokia is partnering with a lot of schools and other outside folks, and so this area allows a meeting like this to happen without it disrupting at all the work that's happening upstairs and around the facility. So there's some photos of it. The other areas on the second floor, this is more, you will have now had to have passed through the security zones, and there's a lounge, and the idea for this, there's a great deck that's directly off of this. So a team that maybe is celebrating a milestone, they've achieved some launch, or they want to celebrate a birthday party, that can happen in this space. And then the other thing I think that we acknowledged, there was a group called 2020, which was a group of top senior sort of future leaders within Nokia that were studying different kinds of things like generational differences and influences on the workplace. And luckily, one of the guys was here in the Bay Area, and we got to meet him, and he's like, where people fly all over the world all the time, and they typically go to the hotel, they never go into the office because there's really nowhere for them to go feel comfortable. And so we came up with this idea of a lodge, which is almost like a mini red carpet club, and there's a variety of meeting spaces, workspaces that occur within this. But then there's also refresh suites, so it's like a little mini hotel room. If you've flown in from Helsinki and you need to take a shower and maybe lie down for a few minutes and kind of collect yourself, you can do that in these spaces. This also acts, not these rooms, but the space or this area in general acts as the kind of touchdown space for all of the mobile workers in the facility. They can either come to this area, or there's some touchdown spaces up in the embedded in the workspace as well. And then kind of to the point of how do you give the engineers the privacy that they need when they're doing their heads down work, but yet get them to interact with one another? So the typical floors, of which there are 4 above us, are organized in terms of a central hub, which is directly off the elevator lobby. And in that hub are things like a coffee bar. It's actually the only coffee bar on the entire floor. The things like print copy and large video conference rooms, and also some kind of cool hut spaces, which you'll see in a photograph here in a minute. And then every floor has a unique amenity, whether it be pinball or pool table or some other type of amenity space. And this is what we call a privacy hut, sort of inspired. A lot of people think 2 minutes? Okay, sure. There we see some of the amenities. And then perhaps the biggest, Lisa was mentioning Agile Office. Basically, we've come up with 5 different components that comprise a kit of parts, and these kit of parts can be used or reconfigured in really any means in any facility globally. Well, I think what we did here that was sort of interesting is we actually treated it like a true Agile Office, sort of taking the world literally, where within the work zone, it's entirely flexible. The power and the lighting are all in a grid, so that everything kind of below that creates the workstations and the enclosed rooms and project rooms and stuff is all demountable, so that they can reconfigure an area in a week rather than within 3 months with the traditional construction. So then we're putting on our Becky hat, but so some of the things that, so they actually did a post-occupancy survey, and I think some of these are great quotes. So people who've never previously been exposed to one another, often from completely different business units or teams, are now overhearing conversations and jumping in, actively engaging.
And another quote we heard was, speaking solely for the Valley, we've gone from being one of the most morose places I've ever worked at to one of the most lively and fun.
And then finally,
it's awesome.
Words of our client. So thank you so much for having us. Thank you to Unwired for having us here today. Too bad Becky